Take a look at this shot from Black Swan. The film was released in 2010, and yet, many filmmakers still reference it today. So the real question is, why do some films stay in our memory for years, while others disappear? To answer that, we need to look at one of the most undervalued aspects of cinema: symbolism. Have you ever noticed how symbols quietly shape your understanding of a film? Most viewers don't consciously focus on them. They aren't part of the main plot, so they're rarely explained. And yet, symbolism often communicates more powerfully than direct dialogue. To use symbolism effectively, we need clarity. There are 5 main categories of cinematic symbols: environmental, object-based, color-based, character-based, light and shadow. For now, let's focus on the first 3. Environmental symbolism works through architecture, landscape, and spatial composition. Some filmmakers treat locations as natural backdrops. Others understand that space carries emotional weight. It's not about perfection, it's about alignment. Cinema isn't a perfect combination of flawless elements. It's the harmony of elements that may be imperfect individually but feel inevitable together. Environmental symbols can provide emotional context, reinforce theme, set atmosphere, reflect internal conflict. For example, loneliness can be expressed through large empty spaces that make the character appear unusually small. In The Piano by Jane Campion, the protagonist loses the instrument that allowed her to communicate with the world. Her emotional isolation is not expressed through speeches. It's visible in the harsh, empty landscape. The environment becomes an extension of grief. Object-based symbols are recurring physical items that carry meaning. However, many object symbols are overused. The challenge is avoiding cliché while maintaining clarity. Symbols are strongest when they are repeated, varied, integrated into the visual system. A single appearance feels accidental. Transformation creates meaning. Some filmmakers use bizarre or unconventional objects symbolically, and it works because the rest of the film's visual language is coherent. When everything aligns, even strange symbolism feels intentional. Cognitive psychology shows that we recognize objects through previous experiences. This means that effective symbolism balances familiarity and context. Symbolic objects should allow the character's inner conflict to be visible without verbal explanation. Color and light are powerful symbolic tools in cinema because they are perceived immediately. Unlike objects which the viewer must recognize and interpret, color creates an instant emotional response. Color suggests what we feel, while lighting controls the intensity of that feeling. Since color only exists through light, cinematography treats them as one system. Lighting reveals color, shapes its tone, and determines how strong the visual impact will be. A single color can carry different meanings depending on context. For example, red may represent love, danger, violence, or obsession. Green can suggest calmness and nature, but also sickness or threat. Because of this, color gains meaning through context and repetition. Color also becomes more expressive when it changes throughout the story. These shifts can impact the character's psychological or emotional transformation. For example, gradual move toward desaturated colors can suggest emotional decline, while a shift from warm tones to colder palettes may visually express alienation. In dreams, different color palettes guide the viewer through distinct symbolic episodes, each reflecting a different stage of the director's reflections of life. When color evolves alongside the narrative, it creates a visual arc that communicates emotional change without relying on the dialogue. Symbolism works because abstract ideas are understood through concrete imagery. We don't think of status abstractly, we think in terms of high and low. Cinema visualizes those metaphors. The image superiority effect explains that images are more likely to be remembered than words. Information presented visually is encoded as both image and concept. Dialogue is encoded primarily verbally, so when a character says, "I felt trapped," you process language. But when you see them framed behind bars or boxed within tight architecture, your brain processes spatial tension, emotional state, and metaphor simultaneously. There are three major principles for reflective symbolism: intro to theme, connected to character, build visual patterns. The theme determines the idea behind the symbol. The character shows how the symbol should appear in the story. And as the plot develops, visual patterns allow the symbol to evolve and reveal different meaning. To better understand how the symbolism works from the technical perspective, we can look at two important concepts: the law of correspondence and the law of duality. The law of correspondence suggests that symbol can become understandable when it is visually supported by other elements in the film. So, when a symbol appears multiple times in similar framing, locations, colors, or situations, the audience gradually learns how to interpret it. The image stops feeling random and becomes part of the film's visual language. The law of duality, on the other hand, describes how a symbol can change its meaning as the story develops. A visual element introduced at the beginning of the film may represent one emotional state, but later appear in a completely different context. This transformation allows the same image to reflect the character's journey, turning a simple visual motif into a narrative tool. Direct explanation has limits, so when a character states their emotional condition clearly, the viewer becomes passive. But when meaning is implied visually, the viewer becomes active. Too obvious feels shallow, too obscure feels confusing. Film philosopher Gilles Deleuze described certain modern films as creating optical situations, moments where the image itself becomes thought. Because if meaning requires slight interpretation, audiences invest more. Indirect storytelling encourages projection. When meaning is not explicitly stated, viewers insert their own emotional experience into the scene. A symbol does not dictate, it invites. That invitation creates personal ownership, and personal ownership creates emotional memory. This is why symbolic films often feel deeper, not because they are vague, but because they leave space for interpretation. That's also connected to the idea of passive guidance, which I explained in my previous video. Some filmmakers push symbolism even further into what is known as poetic cinema. Poetic cinema often expresses films prioritizing mood, atmosphere, and visual beauty over traditional narrative structure or plot. In films like The Color of Pomegranates, narrative becomes secondary to image, rhythm, and symbolic composition. These films explore complexities of human emotions and experiences through more abstract, symbolic, and often visual language. Poetic cinema often explores realms of subconscious, memories, dreams, existential contemplation, and philosophical narrative. The poetic directors are akin to visual poets. They weave cinematography, mise-en-scène, sound, and editing into a cohesive, aesthetically pleasing piece. Poetic cinema is made to evolve rather than explain, and suggest rather than define. It resonates on a sensory, emotional, and intellectual levels like literature. If you liked this video, check out the description for my premium concept creation guide, where I explain all the main tools and techniques you need to turn a simple idea into a memorable masterpiece. Symbols are not optional artistic flourishes. They are one of the most powerful storytelling tools available. And remember, cinema is about skills, not talent. See you in the next one.